Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today for the Digital Infrastructure Resilience in a Hotter World event. This is hosted by the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative, or GeSI. As an organization focused on the intersection between sustainability and digital, we at GeSI are very pleased to welcome an esteemed panel of speakers to discuss the topic of infrastructure resilience. Please welcome our speakers, Klaus Kondrup. He is a senior expert at the European Commission's Directorate General for Climate Action, or DG Klima. We also have Emily Wallace, manager at the Meteorological Office in the UK, and Marco Holsworth, senior vice president at the Operating Office at Deutsche Telekom. So welcome to our speakers. Today's event is an ongoing conversation on paving the way towards a more climate resilient future following the recent publication of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the Ipcc's sixth assessment report, or AR6. And we're hoping to have GeSI's Managing Director and CEO Luis Neves share some introductory remarks, but there's been a shift in his schedule, so I'm sure Luis will be able to join us later. So we will crack on with the presentations. A very quick reminder to please hold your questions until the Q&A portion, or you can also enter them in the chat, and then we can revisit them then. So without further ado, I'd like to call on our first speaker, Klaus Kondrup, to discuss the European Commission's recent technical guidance on climate-proofing infrastructure. Klaus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for the invitation and good afternoon to everybody. I will present a new technical guidance on the climate-proofing of infrastructure in the EU budget period 2021 to 27, which the European Commission adopted on the 29th of July this year, and which will be published in the official journal of the EU this week on Wednesday. The guidance responds to the requirements of climate proofing of infrastructure, which are laid down in legislation for various EU funds under the EU long-term budget for the period 21 to 27. In addition, the European climate law indicates in recital 33 that it should be ensured that EU-funded projects are resilient to the potential adverse impacts of climate change through a climate vulnerability and risk assessment, including through relevant adaptation measures, and that they integrate the cost of greenhouse gas emission and the positive effects of climate mitigation measures in a cost-benefit analysis. And this is included in the climate proofing guidance. So the guidance is in the first instance intended for EU-funded investments in infrastructure in this 7-year budget period, but of course it can also be applied elsewhere in the EU and outside the EU. But let me add that after summer, we have all seen the news with climate disasters in Europe and around the world. It is even more pertinent to integrate climate mitigation and adaptation measures into infrastructure and other investment decisions. Next slide, please. Where do we come from? The new guidance is for the budget period 21 to 27. This is the new 7-year period for the EU long-term budget. But we build on an approach. This is a funny looking slide. It builds on an approach from that we implemented in the period 21 to 2014 to 2020 for the category of projects called major projects. It means that many member states are already familiar with climate proofing from the previous period, and that the new guidance builds on lessons learned from the period in 2014 to 2020. And just to mention, major projects are large infrastructure projects from 50 to 75 million euro and up. Next slide, please. In the change from the period 2014 to 2020 to the new period of the budget from 21 to 27, there is a stepping up at the EU level of climate action compared to previously. Overall, for the new EU long-term budget, the target is 30% climate action compared to 20% in the preceding 7 years. Climate proofing will cover more EU funds than ever before and a wider range of types and sizes of infrastructure projects, and it will no longer be restricted to the so-called major projects. As regards the mitigation of climate change, the guidance includes an updated and more ambitious approach to the quantification and monetization of greenhouse gas emissions. As regards the adaptation to climate change, the climate vulnerability and risk assessment benefits from various developments the last 7 years, for instance, from the large investment in the European Space Programme and the EU-funded Copernicus Climate Change Service. It makes available, reliable and quality assured climate data for free and in an efficient manner. The move away from major projects to a wider range of EU funds calls for guidance on documentation and verification of the climate proofing process, and I'll come back to that later. The new guidance covers in detail the coordination and thereby potential time and cost savings between climate proofing and environmental assessments, notably the environmental impact assessment and the strategic environmental assessment. The guidance also includes recommendations reflecting lessons learned from major projects on how member states would support the climate proofing of infrastructure. Next slide, please. Climate proofing is a process that integrates climate change mitigation and adaptation measures into the development of infrastructure projects. The guidance emphasizes the usefulness of integrating climate proofing into the usual project development cycle, which is also referred to as project cycle management. And this is one of the lessons learned from the previous 7-year period. You find the same diagram with the same colors in the guidance, but with the empty boxes filled in. The project development cycle can also help in tapping into synergies between climate proofing and environmental assessments. Next slide, please. So in the guidance, we have divided the climate proofing process into 2 pillars, which reflects the important differences between climate mitigation and adaptation and the different policy objectives and targets. The split in 2 phases brings efficiency gains in response to a legal requirement laid down in the InvestEU regulation. So we have 2 pillars and 2 phases, a screening phase and a detailed analysis phase as part of the approach. If we move on, please, next slide. So infrastructure is a broad concept, and we have a range of EU funds that may support investments in infrastructure. And in the legislation for the specific EU funds, you'll find a definition of what would constitute eligible infrastructure. And the climate proofing guidance is drafted with a wide range of infrastructure in mind, so it's not dedicated to information technology or broadband connections, but it's a general guidance. And all the concerned services of the Commission have taken part in the drafting of the guidance. Next slide, please. This and the next slide focus on the mitigation pillar of climate proofing. In the guidance, we have included a screening list of various types of infrastructure that makes it possible to do the screening rather efficiently. But in some cases, it may be necessary to estimate the greenhouse gas emissions and compare with threshold values that we have included in the guidance. And phase 2 on the right side with the brown background includes the quantification and monetization of greenhouse gas emissions, as it is required in the legislation in the European climate law. In addition, in particular for long-lasting infrastructure, it has become relevant to verify its compatibility with the new and more ambitious targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions in the year 2030, and then we will have targets for 2040, and then climate neutrality by 2050. Next slide, please. For the quantification and monetization of greenhouse gas emissions, the guidance refers to the carbon footprint methodologies developed by the European Investment Bank and the indicated shadow cost of carbon. So for many types of infrastructure, the methodology is available, and for other infrastructure, it's necessary then to go back to the basic guidance published in 2015 and quantify the greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. If you move on to climate resilience, this and the next slide focus on the adaptation pillar of climate proofing. The approach focuses on identifying, assess, and address climate risks. Climate risk can be addressed through the identification, appraisal, planning, and implementation of relevant adaptation measures. There is a considerable uncertainty involved, among other, from the future level of greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, which, notably for long-lasting infrastructure, may warrant regular monitoring and follow-up of critical design assumptions. In addition, infrastructure investments should give due regard to adaptation strategies and adaptation plans at various levels of governance. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the stages in the recommended approach to the climate vulnerability and risk assessment, followed by the identification, appraisal, and implementation of the relevant adaptation measures. And in the guidance, you will find more detailed explanation of these stages and steps. Next slide, please. In the period 2014 to 2020 with major projects, it was defined in the legislation precisely what information should be provided. And in the new guidance covering more funds, we have generalized that description, but it is of course important that the information is that the climate proofing process is documented and that the investment decision can be based on the available information and that the climate proofing is verified. Next slide, please. So I don't know if I'm out of time, probably. This slide includes links to the website with the guidance as adopted on the 29th July. And following translation and layout into 22 other languages, the guidance will be published in the EU official journal later this week. Let me conclude by thanking you for your attention and by thanking the organizers for the invitation to today's event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus. You're actually well above time, so very well done indeed. And it is very much critical for the project leads, experts, and other stakeholders that will or are already taking this on. And zooming out now to present the latest assessment report and the current initiatives of the Meteorological Office in the UK is Emily Wallace. Emily, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the introduction. So yes, I'm Emily Wallace. I manage a lot of the adaptation projects on infrastructure resilience within the Met Office. So I want to talk today, as you said, about the latest assessment report from the Ipcc. So I'll be giving a global view on the current and future risks from climate presented in that report. I also hope this will serve as a practical guide for those taking their early steps in climate adaptation and mitigation. So I'll be starting off with that general picture from the Ipcc, looking at the risks, the changes to the risks that we're likely to see in future and current climates. I'll be then thinking about the impacts that they may have on digital infrastructure. And then moving on to thinking about the modern techniques that we can use now with the modern climate projections to really make the most of the available information to make the smartest adaptation and mitigation decisions that we can. So if we can move on to the next slide, I'll just introduce the Met Office briefly. So the Met Office in the UK is more than just the weather forecasts that you might see on the TV. We work across the timescales in terms of doing weather forecasting, but also climate projections and working with government and industry. So we're a trading fund within BEIS, which is a government department in the UK, and our purpose is to help the people of the UK, the businesses and government and individuals make better decisions to stay safe and thrive. So as I say, my role within the Met Office is mostly in climate adaptation, and so I'm working with businesses on a day-to-day basis to help them make better decisions to indeed stay safe and thrive. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So this slide I think it's quite a stylish graphic, but it's also got quite a hard-hitting message. This was a graphic produced by scientists in the UK from Reading University. And what it's showing actually is the global temperature change from 1850 up to the present day, and the darker red colours are denoting years that have warmer global mean temperatures. And you can see that those are all clustered up towards the right-hand side, as you might expect. So the really clear graphic to show the extent of climate change over the period since the Industrial Revolution. And in fact, what we've seen is around about 1 degree of global mean temperature rise since that period. And this is largely driven by the use of fossil fuels. And I'm sure that none of that comes as a surprise to anyone in the room. If we could move on a slide, please. Thank you. So how do we know that this temperature change? This is leaning on the Ipcc report, figure 1 of the summary for policymakers. How do we know this change is from anthropogenic causes? So we use models, we use climate models. So it's a process called climate attribution. We run the models with anthropogenic forcings included, so that's having the carbon dioxide levels and other greenhouse gas levels that we have in the present day, and running them again without those levels, so having those levels at pre-industrial concentrations. And what you can see on the slide here is that the black line, which is the observed global mean temperatures going back to 1850, that uptick in the global mean temperatures you can only reproduce with the greenhouse gases as seen in the real world. If you try and use the pre-industrial anthropogenic forcings, you get that flat line towards the bottom, so the global mean temperatures don't tick up. That's the kind of global picture. I'm sure there's no one in the room who needed convincing that the climate has changed. What I'm going to move on to now is thinking about what we can do about those changes and prepare ourselves for the future. And the Ipcc's got some really good resources for taking that early view, looking at the changes we're expecting to see in a large scale. And I think that's a really good starting point for understanding how we can adapt into the future. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. One of the great new features of the report is something called the climatic impact factors, the climatic impact drivers. So these are aspects of the climate that would be expected to have an impact on businesses and individuals. So they may be positive or they may be negative. A lot of them would be positive or negative depending on the industry or individual. So I've picked out some of the main messages. This is a slide looking at temperature impacts. And what you can see in those bars at the top there is that that graphic has been made by breaking the world into around about 50 regions and then looking at these impact factors over each of those regions. The purple bars are showing where many of where the regions are are looking in the future climate to increase, and the orange bars are where the impact driver is expected to decrease. So it's no surprise that the impact drivers related to mean surface temperature are expected to increase in almost all regions, and same with extreme heat, whereas the cold impacts are expected to decrease. So sort of thinking about what the impacts of that might be for digital infrastructure, I think this is a really good place to start to think about what the risks and opportunities might be in the future climate. So for example, the extreme heat might be leading to problems with cooling systems for supercomputing facilities, whereas a reduction in number of frosts could be pointing towards fewer problems with overhead line icing, for example. I've also pulled out a map showing, so it's just a really broad scale picture of global mean temperature, local temperature changes in a 2-degree world. And the reason I've pulled this out is to look at the temperature gradient through the world. So what we're looking at there is that the northern latitudes are expected to see greatest temperature rises, and the greatest temperature rises are also expected to be on the land as opposed to over the ocean areas. So again, that helps you, if you have a global business, to think about where those impacts are going to be felt most strongly. And I've pulled that out of something called the Ipcc Interactive Atlas, which allows you to zoom into various different emission scenarios, various different parameters, so different temperature parameters or precipitation, sea level rise, for example, and you can zoom into different regions to have a look at those broad scale changes. So we move on to the next slide, please. So here I've started looking at oceanic impacts. The sea level rise component is, as probably doesn't surprise anyone, expected to rise almost exclusively over the entire globe. And that's a change that we are committed to in the whatever emissions pathway we end up on for a really large number of years. So sort of thinking about what sort of impacts that might drive for digital infrastructure. Relative, the sea level rise could be expected to impact ports and perhaps change where the global supply chain can be operating. The other impacts to be considering could be coastal flooding, where salt ingress into infrastructure on coastlines might be expected to experience faults in the future. So if we could move on to the precipitation, please. Thank you. So precipitation pattern is somewhat more complex than either temperature or sea level rise, where whilst there are nuances and it is worth drilling down once you start getting to adaptation decisions, the general picture is quite straightforward, that we are just looking at increases in both of those. So precipitation, the general message is that the wetter regions still tend to be getting wetter, and the drier regions tend to be getting drier. So in the UK, that sort of general pattern is held up. We are looking at warmer, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers with intense precipitation increasing. So the climatic impact driver bars do look at somewhat more complex here, and that is partly due to the more nuanced patterns of change that we're expecting to see in precipitation. So, for example, we are expecting to see in some regions a less confident signal for an increase in landslides, which obviously would have potential impacts for infrastructure in terms of damage to the actual infrastructure, but also in terms of the services that you need to operate that infrastructure. For example, if a piece of infrastructure is affected, it may be more difficult to get personnel in to repair the damage. So it's worth thinking about that bigger picture, not just the direct damage to the infrastructure, which I'll come on to a little bit later. You can also see quite a relatively strong signal here for many regions seeing an increased fire risk. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So being based in the UK, I thought it would be remiss of me not to mention that this is probably true in many countries listening to the recording to the session today. There are more drilled down, more accurate products available within countries. So for the UK, that's the UK Climate Projections, or UK CP18. And there you can see many of the similar resources that you can find on the Ipcc, but they are tailored to the country. So there are fact sheets available through UK CP18. There's a user interface which is very much like the Atlas that I described just now, but the detail is that much greater because it's focusing on the UK, and some of the quality of the products will be greater because they are designed specifically for the region. There's data available, which is the sort of thing that we'd be using in some of the case studies that I'll describe later on. And a lot of these products can be quite overwhelming, I think, when you first come across them. So there are training available. So in the case of UK CP18, the Met Office has developed training looking at supporting businesses through identifying risks to their business, understanding how to get a picture of whether those risks are likely to get worse or better in the future, and then how to communicate that to the rest of the business. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So as I said earlier, I don't think there's anyone in the room who's probably not expecting that changing climate is going to bring impacts. But I wanted to pull out two really strong messages from the sixth assessment report. So those two strong messages are, firstly, for every cumulative ton of carbon we emit, each ton creates more warming. And that's approximately linear relationship. So that means every ton of carbon we emit is important, and the sooner we can get onto the mitigation in earnest, the better. And the second message is that we are locked into impacts for many decades to come, no matter which emission scenario we choose to find ourselves on. So this really points to the importance of both adaptation and carbon reduction or mitigation from the Ipcc report. So I wanted to, if we could move on to the next slide, think a little bit more about what those options might be. And I think it's true to say that not all adaptation options are born equal. The Met Office has been working with Deloitte and on a platform called the Goal 13 Impact Platform. So this is a program to help businesses understand where they are on their climate sustainability journey, or climate proofing, as we heard from Klaus. And learn from other businesses what sort of options are out there, and try to reap the benefits of that. What this platform has shown us is a really wide array of climate initiatives, which is great to see. And what a lot of the businesses are saying is that they're able to reap benefits from the climate initiatives themselves. So you can see in this graphic here, a lot of the participants are saying that the initiatives strengthen their business. A lot of them are saying that it reduced their operational expenditure. And I think it's true to say that it's very possible to make adaptation decisions that are hitting that sweet spot, that are what I like to call the win-win-win-win scenarios, that is reducing emissions, increasing resilience, improving customer experience, and reducing expenditure. And on the platform, there's a really nice example of this from Openreach, one of the digital infrastructure organisations within the UK, who are undertaking a programme of replacement of copper cables with fibre. So this is a reduction in emissions in terms of the operation of the equipment, increase the resilience because the copper is far more subject to risk than the fibre. And that reduces the operational costs, and it also improves the customer experience because the actual product is much better to use at the far end of the service. So whilst there are definitely hurdles to overcome in doing that particular adaptation method, it can be classed as a win-win-win-win. So yes, that whilst those options are there, it may feel like a tall order. So if I could skip on to the next slide, please. So I wanted to think about how it is that we start to uncover these adaptation options that hopefully are hitting that sweet spot as best as we can. And I think the first step is to think about where the options should be focused, and there are three main spaces to be thinking about here. So the places where we're going to expect to see risk to infrastructure are on the direct infrastructure resilience. So that's impacts actually affecting the infrastructure itself, and I would say the ability to maintain and operate it. So that might be about getting workforce to a piece of infrastructure, not just the damage to the infrastructure itself. The second place would be in the supply chain resilience. So being able to source the materials and services that you need. And the third would be in customer behaviour. So with climatic change, we're expecting to see change in attitudes of customers and also in their requirements. So for example, customers may not want to be buying products if they think they are very carbon intensive, and they may not be living in the same places as they were previously, which brings its own risk to businesses that need to be mitigated. And I suppose one of the main points I'd like to make today is that the modern climate projections can help us to look at these areas and make the best adaptation and mitigation decisions we can, because they're that much more sophisticated than they have been in past years. So what I'm going to talk through now is two case studies looking at how the Met Office has used climate projections to drill down into those sweet spots and make the smarter adaptation decisions. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. This is a slide thinking about a case study we undertook on the design criteria for nuclear power stations. So nuclear power stations have cooling systems not dissimilar to those for supercomputer equipment that are sensitive to both maximum temperature and humidity. What I would think is the difference is that nuclear power stations are designing to 1 in 10,000 year events. Over design is extremely costly, whereas under design could be extremely dangerous and actually increase your operation costs if you're having to switch off the equipment more often than you expected. So because of the complexity of the question here, what we did was take an event-based approach rather than a purely statistical approach looking at just maximum temperature, which is common in design criteria questions. So by event, I mean we understood how very extreme temperatures increase and then decay. And this meant that we could drill down into the questions that really mattered in terms of design. We used very advanced statistical and modelling techniques to reduce the uncertainty and reduce the cost. And we're also able to start the customer being able to plan how they would deal with a very extreme event. So it wasn't just building the equipment to withstand a 1 in 10,000 year event, it was helping them understand their equipment in order to be prepared for the 1 in 10,000 year event. So if I can move to the next slide, please. So this is thinking about the power system, the electrical power system, which, as I'm sure in many countries in the UK, we're moving towards a highly renewable system to reduce our carbon emissions from our power system. But of course, if you're on a very renewable power system, that power system is very reliant on the weather. So it can be much less resilient than one that is able to depend on coal or gas. The intermittency of supply and the change in consumer behaviour could make our energy system much less resilient. So we've been working with the National Infrastructure Commission, who are working on behalf of government to help them design a more resilient future power system. So in adaptation decisions, it's very important to avoid lock-in. So what we did was to take a system agnostic approach and drill down into the sorts of weather events that I'm being told that my network connection is slow and that I should try turning off my webcam.
We hear you fine, Emily.
Oh, okay, so I'll ignore that. Thank you. Last time I did one of these talks, the computer told me it was overheating. I had to go and open a window, which I quite liked for an early adaptation action. Excuse me. So yes, we drilled down into the sorts of events that would be expected to impact any future energy system, and that allowed the energy modelers and the government to be able to think about the designing the network to be both low carbon and resilient, and look for those sweet spots by using the available data in a more sophisticated way. So if we could skip on 2 slides, please. Thank you. I'll just sum up what I've been saying today. So to get ready for tomorrow, so looking for those climate adaptation and mitigation actions, it's really important to first of all understand the big picture for changes to your impact. So this can help you draw out the highest priority risks and opportunities that climate change will bring. So that might be using the Ipcc Atlas and AR6 report, but also the UK CP18 projections if you're in the UK, or the equivalent in other countries. It's then important to prioritise and analyse the gaps. So prioritise the risks and analyse the gaps in knowledge. So this is very much like the climate screening that Klaus has already talked about. There's quite a few resources. The EU documentation sounds like it's going to be a great resource. I'd also point towards our climate data for reporting and decision-making course for how to weigh up those different risks and work out which ones you're going to drill down into. Then say the advanced use of modern projections and science can really improve our confidence in the world we're going to see in the future, even without reduction in reduction of uncertainty in the overall projections. It can help us drill down into those really smart decisions and reduce costs in the long run. And my final point is that it is possible to make win-win-win-win sweet spot adaptation options. And the Goal 13 Impacts platform is a great place to go to understand what other businesses have done in that space and to learn what you could be doing as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for the insights and indeed highlighting the critical points that we must challenge ourselves with. And I'd like to invite our final speaker, Marco Holzwarth, to present a very timely use case from Deutsche Telekom and their efforts in tackling the catastrophic floods in Germany. Marco, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to Emily and Klaus. You gave me some minutes more. Thank you. This is much appreciated. I'll check. Can you see my slides so far?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, perfect. That sounds good. So yes, very timely impacts and catastrophes. Pretty much 2 months ago, we had those terrible floodings and rain and floodings in the western part of Germany and also in Belgium. I will show you in the next 25 minutes then how we tackled this challenge for customers as well as for us as an organization to bring back our infrastructure and our services to the customers. So here I will show you in the first chapter some of the damages we faced and also our customer faced, and then we built something we call a zoning plan, where we got our emergency help measures and our fast help measures, and how we do our long-term recovery, because some of our infrastructure will not rebuild until tomorrow. So this is quite a serious damage there, so it takes some time. And then I will share with you some lessons learned we have from those experiences there. Perhaps you have read in the newspapers or in TV how serious the impact was. We have 3 major areas that were hit the most. So I will focus today and give some examples about the lower area we have impact in the Ahr Valley. This is pretty much special because it is 25 kilometers where I'm based in the Cologne and Bonn area in Germany. So they have been really hit hard. In some villages, 80% of population is impacted. Loss of people, a lot of people lost their families or family members and all that stuff. I will not stretch that too much because you have seen, I'm pretty sure, those pictures from the areas. The Ahr Valley is very dense, and there are a lot of circles of the river there. So they had impact from several sides, and so the infrastructure was also destroyed very much in those areas. Beside from the 180 victims there in our infrastructure, we have lost 250,000 customers in the mobile connection because the towers were destroyed or lost electricity or lost the connection to our backbone network. And also the fixed lines were destroyed, so that we had over 100,000 people disconnected from life, from their families, relatives. So people were not able to contact anybody the days after the main flooding. So I will show you what this was about. This is a small village called Altenaar. You can see there Ahr, this is the main river, and also the houses there and the inner of the small village. So our exchange station there, in German we call it Hauptverteiler, the main exchange, was in the inner of this small village, completely destroyed, also all the houses out there, and also the infrastructure. So there was a fiber cable. Emily mentioned it before. It's good to change from copper to fiber. That's what we did there. But the Ahr went up from 50 centimeters to 9 meters wave. So everything complete lost and complete deconstruction. So we lost the main exchange station, the cables, and also the connections to the mobile antennas up on the hills. So that's where we lost the fixed line connections and also the connections for mobile. So you can see in the picture some of the damages we had there. So also most of the bridges were lost. As you can see, we had in Bad Neuenahr, this is a small village with 30,000 citizens over there. There were only 3 bridges left, and we had to build some unconventional solutions there. So hanging our cables across the river from balcony to balcony, or telling the army to build a bridge for us with new masts and antennas to get over the river and all that stuff. So let me show you what we did first. When this horrible flood with all the damages came, we had the question, okay, what do we have to do? And our first intention was not to get back the infrastructure, but to help the people there that have been hit so hard. So first we built this kind of zoning plan, the direct help emergency measures. So this was really pressing for the people, and we said, come on, let's have a look how we start with that. And this was our basic plan. We built that within the first 24 hours. And the first step, I will go through that, was on the left-hand side, build a single point of truth for customer help. So we decided, let's bring together our network data, then make measurement, what of our infrastructure pings back and is still there or is damaged. Then we merged that with our customer data, so people address what tariff they have, and then we also had on-site inspections, how much damage do we have there. And so we got a kind of heat map or a master list, whatever you call it, a single point of truth, where we can identify, okay, we need there a special help, or we can wait there a little bit. Also, we got a list of priorities from there. So in the next step, you can see what we saw with the on-site inspections. Some of the stuff was pretty easy. We can repair them within some weeks. Some of them will be done within 3 weeks, 3 months, and some will need something a year, something like that. But we try to minimize the impact for our customers as much as we can. So let me show you what we first did. Technical network disaster recovery. This is the most important part, and we put a clear focus on bringing back our backbone wiring. You can here see from Bad Neuenahr or Altena, we put new cables, also fiber, back with the help of THW, it's called technical help. They helped us to bring back the cable through the valleys, through the forest and all that stuff. Second, we built those wiring from balcony to balcony across the rivers, because just all the bridges were destroyed, or most of them, so no connection from one side of the river to the other. So we have connected them back. Next step was, the gray boxes, we call them MSAN. This is a technical term of our network department. They connect the streets and villages to our backbones. Some of them have been only impacted by mud. You can clean them easily, what you see on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see total destruction. You have to change them. You have to build the foundation again and connect them to the network, bring electricity and connection to the backbone again. So next step was where we had the complete destruction of our infrastructure. We brought containers, we call them safety containers. They have complete network infrastructure inside them and are pre-configured for the connection of our customers. So they are stored at a central facility in Germany and owned by our disaster recovery management team. They were sent, I think, within 2 or 3 days to the Ahr Valley, built up, and are working currently as an interim solution for our customers. On the next slide, you can see this is Altena. All the buildings on the left-hand side and the middle part of this picture, they are lost and they will be destructed, most of them. And you can see our building where our hardware was included. So completely lost. We built up new wires and fiber there, and we said, okay, we bring back the mobile coverage by placing a mobile antenna over there, so that the people can get their connection for the families, for connecting the families, for organizing help and also to contact their insurance so that they can get their money back from the insurance on their side. So on the other side, we said, okay, this is infrastructure, we have to do that, but what is our urgent help directly for the people impacted in those areas? And we decided, because in the past we have brought down all our storage we have regarding mobile phones, power banks. So we collected them all over Germany from our retail shops and brought them out of our service centers, brought them centrally here to Bonn. We pre-charged them because the people have no electricity there. And we packed those shuttles you can see there. And a lot of our guys in their free time came to our head office and helped us in distributing those stuff to the most hit families in the area there. So as you can see, several thousand cell phones, several thousand power banks have been distributed in that area with no sign in or show me your ID card, because people lost their ID card, whatever. We just distributed mobile phone. Here you have a connection. Don't ask for security or privacy checks. Here is urgent help. We are there. Also, our retail shops in 3 cities, in Bad Neuenahr, Euskirchen, and Eschweiler, have been hit hard. They have been completely destroyed. So we decided to put on trucks there. We normally use them for sales reasons to market fiber in some areas. So we collected them all over Germany, brought them to the Ahr Valley as a kind of mobile shop. Astonishing was people also spent their time there in charging their mobile phone, having a coffee, talking about their experiences, what happened to them the last days there. So this is quite a community place now in those areas. Next step, all people in that area that have been connected to our mobile network that we brought back have received an SMS, so we gave them unlimited data so that they can send pictures of their destroyed houses, organize whatever they need. The people have other needs than thinking about their mobile bill or something like that. So we said, okay, give them everything and there will be no bill. So as you can see, here are some impressions from our teams out there. You can see some of the destructions there, but also the people were so much thankful for having somebody who cares about them and who provides them some unbureaucratic help there in the first days of this catastrophe. So this was quite astonishing for our guys. And as you can see in the lower right part, the first week or so, even the roads were not usable. So we asked the guys to take us with them in their pickup. So this was the normal transportation system there. And you can see I had a chance to be there the first days, and this was quite overwhelming as well as for me. I had to do with some disasters in the past, but this one was very overwhelming for me as well. So an awesome experience, what we did there and what happened to the people. So last step was we set up a team, a company-wide team of to coordinate our help. We have a force of 30,000 people in our service centers all over Germany. So they are normally picking up calls, making sales and all that stuff. So we have in addition 8,000 people in field service all over Germany who make the connections at home and all that stuff. And also networks, retail, shop department, the corporate emergency team. We put all them together in one team to coordinate everything in the most hit valleys or areas. So one of the pieces was billing. I talked of that before, about that a little bit before. Stop invoices. People don't care about their billing and they have other things they want to think about and not invoices. Even don't get money back, no invoice reminders and all that stuff, and put on unlimited data. We made a special hotline and started to call the customers proactively if everything is okay, if we can be of some help, or if they need something from our side. We also put for non-Deutsche Telekom customers, there are people, their non-Deutsche Telekom customers had them, so we put out data vouchers for all non-Deutsche Telekom customers. We had the trucks over there, on-site support, so we had the teams with their rucksacks and the power banks and the mobile phones and all that stuff. Everything was there. So at the end, we built up some self-service, so the people can look up online if their when their connection comes back. So we have a clear plan, the 4 weeks plan, the 3-month plan, beyond 3 months up to a year, and people can look up with their address when we come back with our network to them. So at the end, fast help measures. Next step, yeah, we made a good plan, I think. When you are reacting to such a catastrophe, sometimes you miss something and you add it as you go. So I think this was the best part we could do for the people there. I will show you some examples for that. First, priority on mobile network. So the flood was from Tuesday to Friday. There was the peak in the flooding. The next week on Friday, 100% of mobile network was back. Was it that stable and was it useful for Instagram or YouTube videos? No, but it was back for having calls, sending some pictures and all that stuff, but not the upload or gaming stuff, but that was not important. 100% back after 1 week. Second one, and this is a hard one, you don't have to read that, because this is blah regarding what we did there. There's the German word Straßenzugbearbeitung. We did it street by street. So what does it mean? Our technical and network department builds up infrastructure again, the gray boxes at the beginning of the street. And then our field service goes out, checks cables, gets the box in the basements in order, checks the connections to the first floor, to the second floor, to the living room, wherever, and rebuilds that and brings new hardware with them. So they're making an end-to-end process from infrastructure right to the living room of the customer. This one was pretty special. I accompanied some of the troops we had there, because especially elderly people, they lost some of their belongings, relatives and all that stuff, and so they don't care about the technology you put in the houses. They were so thankful for every help and for every connection they got back. So this was tremendous in the customer effect. So keep in mind, if you don't speak German, just keep in mind Straßenzugbearbeitung. This is the most important word. So, and at the end, we visited more than 30,000 customers proactively with our Straßenzugbearbeitung. And as of now, this morning, we have originally lost 100,000 fixed lines. So 90% are already back after 2 months. So a big thank you, even they are not here, to my colleagues from the networks department and from our field service. They did an awesome job and are still doing that in an area where you have such a large destruction of infrastructure, of normal life, even of schools, public buildings, what you can imagine. So a big thank you to them. They did an awesome job. So let me come to the last piece. You can ask, okay, what is with the rest of the people? The 10,000 or the 10% you have not recovered so far. We built a special product. It is based on LTE or even 5G. So it is mobile network. So this is number one. People get that for free the first 12 months for the hardware. And as soon as their fixed line works again, they connect it to their fixed line network. So it stays there. and we're currently in distribution of those devices to all our customers. So this gives them a connection in a kind of back to normal state. So pretty good product, I really like that, but it's not a product show today. We have it, we use it, people get that, and it helps. That's what you have to remind later on. And then communication is key when you have such catastrophes. We built up with a TV channel in Germany. It's called Z1. It's one of the largest private channels there. And we built up a kind of donation gala there, a TV show Saturday evening, a lot of celebrities and all that stuff. And also back in our service center, 2,000 employees in their free time, taking the calls, taking the donations. So at the end, there were about 30 million of donations to the most hit families. And also we, as Deutsche Telekom, put on another million on top to our efforts in infrastructure, to our customer help, to the free of or the voluntary work for this donation gala, all on top, on top, on top. It helps the people here nearby our headquarters. So the fast help measures, we combined the communication, I said that before, the mobile service points, we are on site, we're near to our customer, that helps a lot, and goes far beyond network, mobile, billing, and all that stuff. Sometimes people go there to recover a little bit and to rest and to have a coffee and to tell their story. Then number 2, the landing page. How much time does it still take to get back the fixed line network? Then a campaign over there. We are there for you, we call it. So we help you wherever help is needed, and also some other communications around it. So long-term recovery, my last, some last slides. What will there be? So some of the infrastructure can't be recovered because the street is not there anymore where there has been our great box, for example. Street is lost, so the location of our box is also lost. This is something Emily talked in the larger context about before, where infrastructure is harmed. We talk about that specifically in a street in the R Valley where the location is lost and will not be recovered. So yeah, we will build in the next year 35,000 new fiber connections. So most of the most hit areas and villages will receive a fiber connection in the future. And sure, this is an enormous investment from our side, but it's also an advantage, because if there's everything lost and we have to build it, we build a future-proof infrastructure there. With the fiber stuff, it's easier for us to make the diagnosis on network outages. It's better for the customer, better customer experience, because they are faster, they are more reliable. So really good deal for us and for the people, for both of it, and also for the public authorities there. And last one, lessons learned. And if you expect now something, wow, how do you build the infrastructure and how do you get a battery powered or something that devices work still? No, not today. I will show you something about the people. Bring back the infrastructure and put in effort. Care about the people and not so much about the infrastructure. And this will definitely pay back. And this is a kind of photo that was shot 1 week ago. One of my guys with the rucksack on the left-hand side, and one of the people in the most hit places on the right-hand side. So faster is better than perfect. We had some defects in our communication, and there was a bounce back. Oh, are there telecom guys? They look like telecom guys. Are they real? Are they officially allowed to talk to the customers and all that stuff? We had that, but on the other hand side, our fast help was more appreciated than the small amount of cases where it goes into the wrong channel. So third point, don't ask for permissions. If people lost their home, their families or something like that, you don't ask for an ID card to get a prepaid mobile or a prepaid cell phone. And at the end, we will bring back the infrastructure, but it's not about the technology or the data pool where we gather all the customer information and the networks. It's about the people that are using the infrastructure. So help the people, it's about the people there. So have them in focus and have them in mind. So I'm pretty much at the end, and this is very common. If you remember nothing else, Straßenzugbearbeitung, German word, don't forget that. But 100% of mobile is recovered within 1 week. Awesome job, thank you to my colleagues. And today already 90% of our fixed line infrastructure is back. And we are working very hard. So my clothes today are just the exception. I put on my working clothes afterwards and go back there. We have to help a lot, and we will help a lot until everybody is back and connected there. So thank you very much. We won't stop. And if you would like, ask some questions or even connect on LinkedIn, then we can have a chat on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Fantastic work from Deutsche Telekom, and indeed a great way to round out these presentations is seeing the practical ways in which digital is transforming how we respond and adapt, not only on a global scale, but also on a local and community level. I'd like to open the floor now for questions from the audience. Please do introduce yourself and your organization before asking your questions. So any questions from the crowd? Please feel free to unmute yourself and introduce.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hello, I'm Antoine. I'm an intern from Post Luxembourg, and I have a question for Marco. For the project, was it created for in the context of flood, your project that you have presented in the slides?
Exactly, it was. To be honest, we have during autumns, we have problems with heavy rains all over Germany. So this is apart from thunderstorms and all that stuff, floodings or a lot of rain are a problem for infrastructure. So we call it a quick start package. We call it quick start package. We can give to our customer if the overland lines are disconnected in a normal state. But that quick start package does not solve a lot of the problems the people have currently in the most affected areas of this flood. So we created this as a kind of new product. And this was also new for us because normally building a price for the market and before we go external with them, it takes 2 or 3 months to build it. And when you have the hardware around it, just to bring it to the systems and have to go to market. This one we made within 3 weeks, something like that. With the exception routine, we can learn a lot for our standard business and how we can make things more simple and more dedicated to the customer and obsessed to the customer. So we learned a lot from that flood. Thanks for the question. Excellent.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the answer.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's Chris Stephan here. So I have a question. Well, first, thank you very much, everyone, for very good presentations, excellent presentations. I have a question for Emily. So Emily, when a company looks at the risk profiles, they often do it with the impact likelihood type matrix. So look at something, how likely is it to happen? What's the level of impact? And of course, if you look at the climate change, you might have different scenarios for different temperature increases. And then for each temperature increase, I guess, some of the graphs you were showing as to the level of impact it might have on flooding and so on. And then that will change over time as well. So as we progress in time, some of these impacts will become more aggressive. And then on top of all of that, you've got different infrastructure project matrix or
Sorry,
investments.
I'm going to have to interrupt because I dropped out for a minute there, and so I heard you up to impact matrix, but I'm afraid I dropped out for the next few seconds.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. So let me go back. So that so companies usually look at the sort of impact versus likelihood, intensity, and so as in terms of impacts, the higher the temperature rise that takes place, the more impact we're going to have. But then there's the question as to which is the most likely sort of outcome. And then you've got different temperature rises would take place at different points in the future as well. And then also different infrastructure investments will have different lifetimes. So, you know, if you're building, I don't know, a data center, for example, you're not expecting it to have the same lifetime perhaps as a nuclear power station will have. And so with all the tools and everything that you were presenting, is there a way of taking all those different parameters and then creating some kind of priority list that a business can take forward as to where it best places its efforts?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do through so through the training I mentioned, but also we often run a workshop with organisations at an early stage where you know, there's so many
I've lost Emily. I don't know if anyone else.
Us as well. Emily, are you with us?
No, we lost her. We should continue. When she comes back, she can be on.
Sorry, Emily, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Oh, my system's really playing up. Gosh, I had some really good points before I was on mute. It was telling me I was on green. I haven't clicked anything. So where was I? Start at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, so, yes.
Oh dear, my computer's really not liking me today. Could someone raise their hand if they stop being able to hear me? Because it's obviously not necessarily going to tell me when I'm not on mute. So yes, that is exactly what we do. So through the training that I talked about, but also through the workshops that we run on adaptation, what we look to do is to uncover all of the risks and opportunities as far as possible that the organisation could be thinking about. So that's the direct risks and opportunities on the infrastructure, the risks and opportunities coming from their services, supply chain, even the technologies that might change as a result of the changing climate. So the power system that I was talking about earlier is a really good case of that, where, you know, EVs are coming online, renewable energy, air conditioning. There's just a huge host of changes that they're having to deal with there. So think about all of those risks and opportunities and then look to prioritize them. So the prioritization isn't just about what's the most impactful, what's the most likely thing to change. So I would be starting to work with them there to say, okay, well, what are the likely changes we're going to see? So increasing temperatures means that, so the increasing temperatures are you know, almost a given almost everywhere in the world. So that means that, you know, these ones are likely to, these risks and opportunities are likely to increase. The precipitation, well, that's a little bit less obvious. We're going to have to dig into the data before we can know which direction those change. So it's about the relative risks and opportunities, the relative change of the risks and opportunities, but it's also about what you might be able to find out about. So, for example, some adaptation options, you're probably going to have to make a decision without much additional information in terms of understanding future climates. So, for example, up until recently, understanding lightning in the UK, the climate projections were really very uncertain to tell you whether or not you're likely to see more of it or less of it, in which case what you're going to have to drill down into is your low risk adaptation options. And in terms of lifetimes of infrastructure and the sort of timescales for the change, that is definitely a challenge. The lifetime of the infrastructure to some extent is kind of easier to deal with. If it's short term, we know that climate variability is going to be more important. If it's very long term, then you've really got to look at the climate change. Which emission scenario we end up in can be more challenging, and it really comes down to the risk appetite of the business. So there are ways to deal with it. For example, we know that the different climate projections to about 2050 are relatively similar. So if your asset lifetime is only likely to last until about 2050, the emissions pathway, which future we're on, doesn't matter so much. If you're looking beyond that, then you can do things like plan for 2 degrees warming, but be prepared for 4. So understand at what point are you going to make a different decision, and really avoid lock-in, which could be a really regretful decision if you don't take that into account. So it's quite a long answer. I hope that was okay.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. Any other questions from the group? And must mention, you can also type your question in the chat box if you're uncomfortable with taking the stage. So
I actually have a question for the speaker that was talking about the German context, of which regrettably I've forgotten the name. First of all, my name is Moritz Zimmermann. I'm Strategy and Business Development Manager at the European Digital SME Alliance. And I was just wondering, out of personal curiosity actually, whether some of the tools that you have developed and have used in this situation, you're also kind of sharing that for actors in the development context. So because obviously adaptation, mitigation in general, but adaptation in particular for the global south is an incredibly important topic, and especially when it comes to infrastructure to keep the economy going in a case of a crisis like that. So I was just wondering about that.
Marco, sorry, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, so I think the question was for me, right?
That's right, yes, Marco.
Okay, would you please reframe a little bit? I'm not quite sure if I got the point exactly, so I want to be precise in my answer. Developers, right?
No, sorry. The development context, developing countries.
Developing countries, okay, wow.
The global south.
Okay, now
what you've described, maybe let me rephrase, what you've described sounded incredibly interesting and impressive, to be honest. And I was just wondering whether T-Mobile is engaged in partnerships in the sharing of best practices and knowledge, that your response to it, including the technology part, can be made available to countries that are in even deeper need, if I may say, because we all know that the global south is being hit the hardest by climate change and temperature rise.
Wow, this is an awesome question. I would like to think about it 1 or 2 hours, something like that, and make a plan for it. The implication is hard. So, okay, I try to give my best. I think the fixed line network in the southern countries you are talking about is harder to develop than here in Germany or in Europe in the center of industry nations. So this is the first point. So the second point for the answer could be, if you are building such projects, or if you want to transfer something of the approach, you have to also consider, and that's what I have not talked about, what about the connection if you don't have a developed infrastructure? And how can you bring it to the people? So the set of technology gets even broader if you think about satellite links and all that stuff, or microcells, for example. So not the big mobile antennas, but microcells to cover a smaller area where people can go. So I think this is an interesting scenario. When they're hit with such stuff, it depends I would say, but I like the idea of satellites. We thought about that in one of our scenarios. Do we distribute satellite devices to the people or build up mobile hotspots based or connected with satellite to our infrastructure? And I think this is one of the ideas you can easily transfer also to the southern countries you are talking about. Did I get the question right?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Marco. And yeah, that's a very interesting answer already.
Thank you, Moritz. Any other questions?
And I mean, sorry, Marco, just the last thing. Maybe we can connect. I'd love to continue this question bilaterally, perhaps without holding up everyone else, because I don't want to monopolize the forum here.
No, that's completely fine. I've put that LinkedIn Connect Me slide not for marketing reasons. It's honest. So please connect me.
So, Marco, this is Luis. Good to see you. First of all, we have not been seeing each other for quite a long time. And thank you so much for, jumping in and making this fantastic presentation. So one question, of course, we're talking here about Deutsche Telekom. We invited you to be part of this webinar. What is the role of your competitors in Germany? So in presence of such a catastrophe, so there are other companies operating in the marketplace. So they also have customers, clients. They also have a responsibility. So how do you connect with them? How do you feel they should be cooperating? Are they ready to respond?
Okay, really good question. Thank you for that. I expected some kind of question like that from you, to be honest. Competitors in Germany. So mobile is not regulated, but fixed line is regulated. You may know. So it's always not hard to deal with our competitors, but it's not that easy to compete and also to help each other. But at the end, there were people who needed our help. So really in the beginning, all of the competitors, and it doesn't matter from where they are, from Munich or from Düsseldorf or which company you may name, we decided not to send each other, and we also buy infrastructure from our competitors. So it's vice versa, not only that they're buying infrastructure from us, also vice versa. And we decided in a very early stage not to send escalations to each other, because it would minimize our workforce in restoring everybody over there. So this was very important. And I have to say, even if I do not that fully convinced, but I say, thank you to my competitors or to our competitors. This was really grown up, a very grown up decision that we pragmatically help the people and not find for market shares. So second one was when people, competitors had sometimes a different approach. We said we stop billing, for example, but we stick with our customers. Others decided to terminate the contract because they can't deliver anymore. So their decision, it's not easy to get those customers then back or connected to Deutsche Telekom, but we have to deal with that, but I'm sure we will find a way. And third, that was from my experience in the most hit areas, people came to us, oh, my network connection is not ideal, or I don't get a connection. And I said, okay, how can I help you? Customer number, something like that. And no, I'm not with you. I'm with your competitor XYZ. And so we often gave them then immediate help that is restricted from a time perspective. So if we get them a mobile phone with prepaid, something like that, it is only 3 months, and then the contract is terminated again. So they can stay with the competitors, and we do not have a problem with each other. Have I covered it, or got your question? Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
it's Chris here. Maybe I could ask Emily a sort of similar question in the sense that when clearly it's complex to do these kind of adaptation analysis and scenarios and the kind of thing that you do in your workshops. Have groups in other sectors done a sort of collaborative approach to this as opposed to individual companies going away and doing it unilaterally? Because there must be an awful lot of overlap between companies in sectors where like the group such as GeSI could do something collectively.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of any collective action where they are really competitors with each other. So it is common for organisations in infrastructure to be joining forces on these pieces of work. So actually, at the basic level, I don't think it is hugely complex. So I think the basic level of identifying the risks and opportunities and starting to understand how to prioritise them is not a hugely complex undertaking. So the workshop we tend to run is of the order of 1 or 2 days. So you can definitely, make some progress in getting on board with the climate journey, as I like to say occasionally when I'm feeling jolly, in a couple of days. Some of those more complex uses of data, definitely, yeah, they are, they can be several months' work to really drill down into the data in lots of detail. But that's really the cutting edge of adaptation options, I would say. And there is quite a lot of middle ground, so it doesn't have to be that bells and whistles drilling down into the minutiae of the data, separating enthalpy and humidity and temperature on an event basis. Yeah, that was a lot of work. That was several months' work, but it doesn't have to be at that level. So the really obvious example was the Energy Networks Association had a really collaborative approach to this, and it's quite common, in fact. Aviation were going to take a similar approach to adaptation reporting. So from the Climate Change Act within the UK, some organisations are mandated to put in what they call an adaptation reporting power report, which is spells out how they are adapting to climate change. And within that, for the organisations that have to do that, quite a few groups do take a collaborative approach. So Energy Networks is certainly one of them that I worked with. The airline industry were doing similarly, and they would be quite a competitive set of organisations. So yes, it definitely does, and yet they tend to be affected by similar impacts, and so it is a really good way to approach the problem, to collaborate in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. One more question we have time for.
If there isn't one from the floor, I could ask Marco a question, but let the floor go first if there is one.
Please go ahead, Emily.
So I was wondering whether you know of any changes to the adaptation activities, initiatives in Deutsche Telekom as a result of the events that we're seeing this year, because I think they really were quite exceptional. Whilst we're expecting to see more and more exceptional events, they were really exceptional. I wondered if you know of what further adaptation measures or flexes to adaptation measures are planned in Deutsche Telekom.
Yeah, I also have colleagues, to be honest, here in the webinar, and they are listening, so they judge me later on how I performed today. And they are doing a tremendous job in the structural stuff, so improving also our footprint in the carbon. And that's where I met Lewis also 12 years ago, something like that. So I was the really young guy. And we were dealing with the efficiency of data centers and the power usage efficiency and all that stuff, and what you can improve there. And 2008, something around that. And in that year, I had no clue about networks and how I can make them resilient against nature impacts or all that stuff. And even about helping then customers this was not my business. I was, okay, data center, yeah, you have the cooling, you have the power usage, it should be efficient. Think about the chips on that, and think about the cabling and the housing for it. You have that all efficient and stuff. And I really like it now coming back to such a topic with such an impact. So this is really cool to get the large circle around that. So I really like your comment on that. The guys, the colleagues are doing a great job. I'm just marketing one piece of the results here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There is the mitigation and the efficiency in particular it's a really obvious, nice link that we can be working there, isn't it? Thank you.
Very good. So, is there any pressing question? Otherwise, I think I will say the final words, closing words. Well, it does not seem the case. So anyway, I think it was an amazing webinar. We are living very challenging times. We spoke today about what happened in Germany, but these events are taking place more frequently everywhere. So if we think about what happened in the United States, Katrina, more recently either, and in many other countries. So we are facing challenges that we have not been before. And so the reason why we have organized this webinar is about how can we prepare ourselves? How can we, as a community of companies, of corporates, really think about that these impacts might be more frequent. They might happen, often. And therefore, what can we do collectively to respond or to be better prepared, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but Michael, you put a lot of emphasis on people. At the end, this is about people that suffers, they lose their family, they lose their houses, and they also lose their communications, they lose energy, they lose everything. And so we need to make sure that we can be prepared and create the resilient infrastructure, the resilient measures that need to be in place to respond to these events. Ultimately, the best solution would be to be net zero by 2030. That's a challenge. We know that, but we need to work into that direction. So that means thank you so much for all your contributions, Emily, Wade, Klaus, and Michael. I think that we will continue this conversation. This is a very, very important topic, and therefore we might come back to you as we are planning to do some work in GeSI when it comes to resilient pathways, when it comes to climate change and the infrastructure. So I wish you all a great day. I think we have an amazing session. The feedback has been great all across the chat, and some messages that I'm getting as well personally. I think we organized this timely. Let's hope that we continue to cooperate together. And thank you so much to you all.
Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.